I am Simone Diplinio. I'm an assistant professor in the University of Chieti Pescara, which some of you already know. And I will talk about mainly, I will talk about the three-dimensional classroom model, which is a kind of classroom model that I have been experimenting in the last 2 years, actually, so it's not so much. But I will be happy to discuss it with you. I was going to introduce briefly myself by talking to you about my research. And I thought about how to communicate to you what are the topics of my research activities. And I came up with this sentence, which is, I do research in neurocognitive basis of inter-individual differences, mental health, and behavioral patterns. So it's clear. I think it's clear enough. To give you more concrete sense of what we really do in our department, which is the Department of Neuroscience, Imaging, and Clinical Sciences. I will, and in our lab of inter-individual differences, I will present you some findings and some studies very briefly. From the beginning of my research activity, I've been interested in knowing how the brain works. So my first research was guided by the question, how does the brain work? Which is a very delusional question, because you can't answer to that question, at least not for the next 100 years, maybe. But we tried to uncover which brain regions associates to support behavior, and which associations in the brain, the associations are called functional connections among the regions, which of these connections, when impaired, leads to psychopathological traits, to psychological negative conditions, and so on. And we came up with some kind of neural architecture. The architecture of the brain is the way the regions transiently associate among themselves to support a specific behavior. What is interesting in the code for behavior in the neural system is that the same behavior, the same behavioral pattern, or in other words, how an individual is, can be achieved in many ways. So an extrovert, for example, or an individual with a schizotypal personality can have multiple brain patterns of activity and functional connectivity. That messes up our work, because this degeneracy of the brain behavior code, degeneracy is a term borrowed by genetics. It stands for the fact that the same behavior can be achieved through multiple neural configurations. This degeneracy makes the study of the brain behavior interactions both fascinating and messy. But this mess, I think, is a direct consequences of how evolution works. I'm my education, my primary education is in biology, so I'm basically a biologist, and I am always fascinated by evolution, and I always try to apply Darwinian and neo-Darwinian principles on how the brain works. And this degeneracy is the direct effect and consequence both of the evolution of diversity in humans. If you think about that, the more complex a species is, and the more diversity the species have. Think about birds, mammals. And this diversity is reflected in a diversity of brain behavior code. Now, let's move into something more practical and more close to what is supporting our discussion later. We are interested in studying how the brain supports the sense of self. So how the brain supports a constitutive sense of identity and sense of agency. The sense of identity is a feature of the sense of self, which concerns the sense of perceiving myself as an individual with a personal narrative, with a voice, with an image, with a smell, and so on. While the sense, the sense of agency concerns the recognition of my actions, that I am the source of my actions and not of other actions, and the sense of being responsible for the repercussions of these actions. So this is how AIs tries to represent identity and agency. I think it's a nice image. In an experiment, to give you an example of the experimental approach to uncover the neural basis of agency and identity, we asked the participants while they were in the fMRI scanner, in the functional magnetic resonance imaging scanner, we asked them to choose between syllables and form words. Okay, in this example, they can form the word moto, which is motorbike in Italian, and the word casa, which is home in Italian. And after their choice, they heard a feedback in the headphones. The feedback could be the same word that they chosen or a random word. And that modulated the sense of agency, because I'm choosing something and then it may happen what I chosen, or it may happen a random event, agency or non-agency. Concurrently, the sense of identity was modulated by the origin of the audio feedback, because the feedback could be given in the own participant voice, which we recorded before, or in another person's voice. So that modulated the identity. Through this experiment, believe it or not, we will be able to uncover that the sense of identity and the sense of agency are encoded by very different systems in the brain, and that there is a really small regions of overlap. So this means that how I recognize myself and how I recognize myself, my actions, these two events are coded very differently within the brain. And it's also interesting that the this functionality of brain regions related to agency were also correlated with the degree of pseudo-pathological traits in healthy individuals. Based on these studies, we also elaborated, as psychometrists, we also elaborated an inventory, which is basically a questionnaire, which is able to measure the sense of identity and the sense of agency. And it is really very interesting to note that these two concepts, they're coded differently depending on the education level, the occupation level, the gender, and many other demographic variables. But also it is interesting to note that the trait sense of self, so how much I am confident in myself, both my actions and my identity, inversely causes hopelessness. So a lack of sense of self causes lower levels of hopelessness through the depressive symptoms. And this is really relevant because this was a collateral of a study related to suicidal thoughts, and hopelessness is high in individuals with suicidal thoughts. So sense of self is beyond both dysfunctional behavior and pseudo-psychological conditions, pseudo-pathological conditions. What about ongoing project? We are into a project called Restoring the Self-Environment Relationships, and we study how it is possible from the acquisition of satellite images of the near home environment. What you see at the top, these are the photos taken through Google Earth of participants' near home environments. If it's possible to know if the environment causes lower or higher mental health issues. And it turns out that the green and the gray spaces, they are both important in fostering mental health, of course, in inverse ways. And for example, gray spaces, as you see in this mediation model, they have both a positive effect of dominance. That means that the more gray spaces I have around my home, and the more I feel dominant in the sense that I can do things. But there is a negative effect of gray spaces on pleasure, arousal, and dominance also, which are affective experiences. And this negative effect is mediated by restorativeness. Restorativeness encompasses scope, fascination, and being away. So how much I am thrilled by my home environment. So the gray spaces have both positive and negative effects on affective states. Another funded project that it's ongoing is to study how green and artistic spaces can interact to allow people resist to device intrusion. I think that I studied from my PhD thesis is the emotional intrusion, the affective intrusion of devices, and the cognitive intrusion of devices. And this is a project that we are, it's very brand new project that we developed now, and it's going to uncover how it is possible to avoid people to be intruded constantly and to build resilience against intruding device. Yesterday, Professor Manuel told us about an image that was really similar to that. In this, that kind of triggered me because this kind of image is really common when we study the sense of agency. And there is a phenomenon that is called out of the loop phenomena, in which when the agent doesn't interact directly, physically, with the environment, he or she feels disconnected and cannot be able to react in situations of emergency. And that, I think that this is a real important parallel with surgery, because there is the option for pilots to automate everything. Why do we need still to check everything manually? We need it because it activates the sense of agency. With the physical interactions, I am owner of the environment and I am into the environment. Instead, we studied that when is the device that acts upon you is the device that has agency. So you are not able to respond if an emergency situation occurs. That is really relevant in our modern society. Coming to the main topic, I'm going to present you a three-dimensional classroom that I am adopting in this course. This course is within the master degree in computational cognitive sciences. The course is called Computational Psychometrics, Techniques for Cognitive and Clinical Research. And basically, this is part of the syllabus. A lot of numbers. And a lot of numbers mean that students, many students, they are a little bit scared. Okay, so the first time I had lesson in psychometrics in general, and especially in computational psychometrics, I had to face the fact that some students were on the reject status of everything. They rejected everything. They were not be able to incorporate any information, and they didn't find interesting anything. So I came up with what was really important to do to overcome these issues. And I thought that the theory and practice should be balanced, and the math anxiety should be addressed, but indirectly. And maybe we should go beyond the traditional passive lectures, which anyway are the standard in Italian university, unfortunately. Because this kind of approach, the old approach, causes listening disconnection, low engagement, no active problem solving, and most importantly, a low reflection of individual identity, a low engagement of individual agency. So I came up with this model, which is a three-dimensional model and encompasses an individual level, a group level, and a class level. At the individual level, there is the student, of course. At the group level, there is a research group in which every student is involved and which simulate the research flow in the specific case within psychometrics. And there is a class-wide project, okay? The primary aims of these projects are to engage students' identity, to make their own choices, to promote their agency so that they feel the need, they feel good when they have to act, when they have to incorporate information. I'm going to present to you more in detail the 3 levels. In the class-wide level, generally, what happens is that students, they choose real-world constructs. Constructs are personality, sense of self, well-being, okay, eating disorders, and they develop a questionnaire, a psychometric questionnaire, okay? They generate the items, so the single units of the questionnaire. They simulate data, then they collect real data. They analyze data, and they write a paper. The paper is reviewed and then published on online repositories without a real peer review process. So this doesn't count as a publication, of course, but they go through the publication steps. At the research group level, they participate in research groups, and each research group chose a topic. These come from their own decision. For example, device-based learning outcomes. They initially prepare themselves, they collect information, and they give lessons to the other students and me about these topics. Then they simulate data, because it's a computational class indeed, and they analyze data. Then they organize a symposium in which they present their experiment. Of course, it's a fake experiment, but it's a real symposium. And of course, there is the individual level, which is, I think, something that every one of us knows. I will show now some results of this process. I remember you that I've been using this model only for 3 years. So I am still refining the model. And of course, I'm still open to discuss it. Students selected a topic that was eating disorders in the social era. Why? Because questionnaires which are about eating disorder are old, and they don't account for the fact that people which have eating disorders, mostly adolescents, now are in the social media era. So they have a really different environment from the one that was in when the questionnaires, the old questionnaires, were developed. These are the items, the questions that the students initially selected. Then they collected data online through the Qualtrics platform. They analyzed the data, so they determined how many latent factors there were in the data, how many dimensions of eating disorders there were in the data. They identified the factor structure, and they tested the reliability and stability of items. This is something technical that I'm not going into to discuss, but they came up with a real questionnaire with 2 factors that were distress from body appearance and distress from eating. And this is an ongoing process. They are publishing their results into PsyArchive after a cruel review process made by me, because they want to get adapted to how the review works. The level 2 example is this one. So they choose a topic, they give a lesson on the topic, then they simulate data and analyze data, and they organize a symposium. In the symposium, each group talks from 15 to 20 minutes, and they are evaluated. This is an example of one outcome. This group made a research on the postpartum psychosis and infant cognitive development, especially on the moderating role of mother-baby interaction in overcoming postpartum psychosis. They've chosen the experimental sample. the psychometric questionnaires that should be useful for the purpose, the analyzed data, and so on. The example of the level, individual level, it's, well, in the oral exam, they read a fake experiment, and they have to check how the results combine with the experimental hypothesis of these fake researchers. This is the third part of the exam. Okay, so with this structure, I hope to be able to involve the sense of self, actually, because they are active identities which choose their topics of interest. They are agent. They collaborate. They cooperate behind my back, and then organize themselves a symposium, which is a thing that surprised me for how went it well. And their critical thinking is really boosted because they are encouraged during the symposium, or always actually, to make questions, critical questions, to peers. They will never ask critical questions to the professor, but to their peers, they will do. These are some of the feedbacks. Some of them liked the fact that they were pushed to cooperate. That was the first time. Some other liked the fact that they stepped from being users of psychometric instruments to developers. And others thanked the fact that other students were there to support them. That is also interesting. Now, since everyone performed a group activity, I also want to do something like that. And our group activity is very, very simple. And you should create groups, I think, of 3 participants. Yeah, 3 or 4, let's say. And this is one for... You should distribute 1 paper for each participant. Okay, so the first step is making groups, which you already done, I think. Okay. Each one of you, actually, can choose a nickname. So, choose your best superhero. Someone has a spare pen for Maria. And you should also choose a course theme. There are some proposals on the paper. On the top, you can see example themes. And of course, the group must agree with the theme, okay? So briefly discuss which theme you prefer to discuss in the subsequent sessions.
I'm like down for anything except for literature.
What do you think about it?
You can also come up with a topic of your own if you're interested in something else. It's not mandatory to follow what it is written.
Not really data scientist. Yeah, I was thinking also about cognitive process. Yeah. What about cognitive processes?
Yeah, let's do it.
Because science is nice and broad. It's interesting.
Did you choose the... Nice.
Without knowing. The next question is explain cognitive processes.
Well, hopefully, at least one of the group should be not mastering, but should be knowing something about the topic that you are choosing. Okay, the main idea of this activity is for each group to come up with a model of three-dimensional classroom, okay, for the theme that is selected. So you will choose each one of you, so each participant, each single participant, will come up with one idea for each of the three levels that I presented you. So one class-wide project for example, cognitive processes, because the group one selected the cognitive processes, and each participant should come up with one idea for a group-level project on cognitive processes. Then one idea for a group-based activity, and one way in which individual students should demonstrate mastery of the topic. Sure. Is that clear? Each participant should write down all the three levels, one idea for all the three levels. You should think about three different ways to teach students, okay? So a class-wide level project, group level project, and how you will likely do an individual assessment for the specific theme on individual subjects. Okay, I think that at least, let's say, two of you from each group wrote down their list. So now, yeah, you can discuss among people within the group, because you have to agree on one idea for each level, okay? And of course, check for coherence among the ideas, so that if you choose ideas from different people, then they have to connect together. And you can use another paper to write down you can use another one to write down the definitive list for the group, okay? So as the final step of this activity, each one a representative from each group, so choose a representative, he or she will present this course of yours with the three levels. And I suggest you to be short, so take 1 or 2 minutes, and to highlight at least one benefit and one challenge of your idea. We can start from this group, if it's okay. We have a microphone. Okay, thanks.
Everywhere. Okay. Okay, so our group chose as a topic the psychology, cognitive processes. What we are challenging the whole.
You should speak to all of them because they are going to vote.
Okay, okay. Okay, what is our design is that for the first level, for the whole class level, we are separating the class to, let's say, 5 different groups. 2 we call test groups. The other 3 are evaluation groups. The test groups are subjected to 3 hours of general anesthesia. Also, they are subjected to a process of suppressing the brain activity for 3 hours. The other test group persons are subjected to a 6-hour suppression of the brain activity. The idea of the measuring groups or subjects is to evaluate how fast and to what extent the mental or cognitive processes are restored after stopping the 3-hour suppression and the 6-hour suppression.
Okay.
The final result should be charted or any kind of a visual presentation of is there a difference between the length of the suppression and the effect that it's gotten at the end.
Okay. So this sounds like an experiment?
Yeah, more or less like an experiment.
Okay.
The benefit is that the students will be actually active, taking into account all their knowledge they have up to this point. The negative part and the challenge is that they should really be aware of what they are dealing with.
Okay.
It requires a little bit of a higher level of knowledge.
A good level of, okay.
Yeah. The idea of the group level is that we give more or less each group of students a task for a poster presentation or an oral presentation, dependently which suits them better, to evaluate the effect of brain overloading during exam sessions. So we give them the ability to extract from themselves which are the most important parameters which can tell them what is the way to evaluate the brain overloading, how this affects their cognitive or interactional abilities, and to present maybe also how to prevent from this in next ideas.
So it's focused on brain overload.
Yeah, more or less on cognitive.
Okay.
Yeah, and then they can make this as a scientific session over a congress. They can present it as statistical bars in the presentations, like, for example, after exam session, I feel tired and I drink a lot of coffee and so on. So they can use like everyday parameters
and this
as
will
a
be
measuring
personal,
point.
so they are reporting their own
Yeah.
experience.
They each of them is including also own experience. So this is also main benefit, because you get personally involved in what you are dealing with. The challenge is that it will be very subjective because of the personal experience for it.
Okay.
And the final idea for the individual level is each of these interactive students from the group are subjected to a psychometric test for evaluation of the burnout as a result of the overload brain activity during the exam session.
Okay, that's really nice, and I really like the fact that you take into account brain parameters and psychometrics. So yeah, my presentation worked. Yeah, nice. Anyway, and not from your group, but from the other people in the other group, how many of you would implement this kind of 3-level classroom in a cognitive science course?
If I had the classroom, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Voting will be hard here. That's your turn. Who's going to talk?
Okay, we decided for a different topic, sorry. We decided that we would like to go with social science. Our class, in the whole class level, we sent all of them out to take some photographies of people, to experience like different ethnic groups, whatever. In our second step, it's really in a nutshell, we would like to send them out again in groups to do interviews based on their photographs, which they took in the first step. So it should be based on it. So they group up based on what they took by picture, and then they do interviews with people. And they evaluate the interviews, and they share their knowledge. And in our last step, sorry, it's really shorter than yours. they do either a social media post on what they did, on their interviews, on their photographs, and they evaluate the social media post, like what they get out of this post, or they do a pecha kucha for our whole class, which means 20 slides. For each slide, you have 20 seconds, but only pictures, so that it's really engaging. So, but this is really a short course, I know.
Okay.
So it could be challenging because we don't have that much information provided for our students. So it's really broad, the feedback which we get, but this could be also a benefit from our method that we really get like a lot of feedback. Yeah,
Okay.
that's it in a nutshell. To
I
save
like
up
that.
time.
Even if you didn't use psychometrics in your experience, it's okay. And how many of you will eventually, within a course of social sciences, implement something like this?
Thank you.
I counted 4, excluding you. Okay. Okay. Nice. I will say also, thanks. I will say also that you take into account the fact that students must be engaged by photography. This is a prior, maybe, but yeah, I mean, but it works. Yeah.
Do
So-
we have persons in the photography? Because this is a problem.
Yeah, for for privacy. We can use AI to blur out the faces. Actually, in Italy you can. Yeah.
Yeah, in Sweden we can. Most in Europe, I know you
Yeah,
can
in
take
public
pictures.
spaces.
You can report faces when doing presentations. I think.
No,
I
it's free.
suppose.
Public space is public photography, so it's absolutely free to take pictures of anything you do in public. At least
Yeah.
in Sweden, there's been a massive debate about this.
In Greece, you get punished.
Okay, that's yeah.
For our lecture, we will find out.
So we chose mental health from psychology, and we went on a flipped flipped approach because I will begin with the individual level. We want students that hold portfolios during the whole experience, documenting what's going on, what's changing to them, how they're feeling, how they're thinking, and then going to group level. We want to have group synthesis activities, meaning to teach our students how to pick a team and how to assign roles. So you to be very mindful of a group's dynamic. It's not like pick your 4 best friends and you can do work together. We're going to find out who is good at what or who is comfortable at what, and then create groups, paying a close attention to their dynamics. And the assignment for each group will be a mock review paper set on we will give them the literature. We're not crazy, at least not so much. So this is the group activity, a mock review paper, and we are going to steal your idea about symposiums for the class level, but we thought it would be a nice touch if this symposium has 2 added dimensions, debates, because when you make a review paper, you pretty much have your unique viewpoint on how you read the literature, and it will be very helpful for them to see that there exist different viewpoints. And also the dimension of social events. They should not only organize the debate, but at least 1 or 2 social events just to get to know their colleagues better. It will be a nice touch, we believe. That's
Nice.
it.
Okay. I missed the individual.
The individual level is their mastery comes from personal portfolios that they can keep, a form of self-assessment if you want. So it will be something that will start at the beginning of the semester or the course, and will continue throughout in order for not only you, the teacher, to know where the student lands at the end, but for the students to have a visual, what can I say, representation of their own growth. That the first page of the portfolio is much different than the last one.
Okay. So you are actually studying the individual students' dynamics of the traits that you.
Well, if you can squeeze out the
Just a
paper from this, why not?
No, it's a smart move for a teacher and a researcher. Yeah, okay. So how many of you will adopt a three-level classroom like that in the context of the study of mental health? Eventually. Okay, I think you won. And there is no prize because they stole my bikes. And no, actually, I don't have prizes, but I think that the three ideas uh, were very, very good. They have some problems in the fact, for example, writing the mock review, it's a process that students, I don't know if they will be able to yeah, I mean, it will not be a review, but maybe it will be a point of view. But anyway, it's something that you mentioned. So implementing brain measures in a course is really complicated, and implementing experiments in the course is really complicated. But it's something that it's really interesting, actually, and at least overcoming the issue of privacy. Also, the social sciences experiment, it's really, really good and really enjoyable. I think it's the most enjoyable for the students if they have passion for photography and for going outside and taking actions. So I think that you surprised me because you made maybe better three-dimensional classrooms than mine. So I think I will steal some of your ideas. But anyway, the essential ideas I think that you all got, and I thank you for that because I think that you really understood what was my intent. So the intent was to involve each student from multiple point of view, from multiple perspectives, so that then each student can find his way or her way to participate, to be involved, to put something of their identity into the course. So I think that that message passed well, and so I thank you for that. For any complaint, just write me at my email or come visit Abruzzo, which is the wonderful region in which our university is in. So let's get to lunch.